Hey, I'm Aragon, and this is an interview with Tico. We've just finished recording the Creator Roundtable, and I'd like to ask him a bunch more questions. The Creator Roundtable itself went over new orb, hyperboost, battlegrounds, and also the new trial rework. I'll leave a link in the video description where you can access that and view it for yourself. So first up will be rune preset. I've had so many people asking for that.
Yeah.
Is there any chance it'll be happening?
There is. We are actively working on it now. I know that's been a big request from players. I myself really like to have them as well. So it's a little bit more involved than I think some of the other presets, just because of the way that it was structured before, how runes kind of were structured on our back end. So it's a bit more work to work that into the presets, but they are coming and we expect them to arrive in Q4 sometime. I'll share that date once we're a little bit closer and more confident about the exact date. But they're actively being worked on and they will come in Q4. So, be happy about that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, similar to rune presets, people would like more flexibility with traits on gear. Mm-hmm. When you go between PvP and PvE, you know how you need like endurance or evasion for PvP, but then you jump into PvE and you'd like to min-max that better with like max mana, health. Is there any possibility that can happen, or are we stuck with having to just have a different gear set?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of viewpoints for it. One is, as you said, just wanting to have one gear set and shifting between traits. And while we do see that is sometimes necessary, what we see more often is that it's actually different sets of gear that you might want to min-max for PvE and PvP. Like in T2, for example, if you're going an endurance build, you might take the Auric Vanguard set. But then if you're going into PvE, you might take the cooldown reduction set or others like this. And so generally, we don't see as much value in the ability to swap traits on an individual item, rather swapping between items themselves. And that's why we added the gear synchronization system, so that once you've leveled up that kind of PvP set, you can synchronize your PvE set to it. So right now, we're not really targeting having this kind of swappability between traits on a specific piece of gear. We think that kind of synchronization and the fact that typically you're going after actually totally different set of gear if you're really trying to min-max PvE and PvP. So that's probably where we'll stay for now.
Next up, is there any plans to expand the masteries? Fair amount of people are maxing it out and are wondering if there's going to be more expansion. Should they save their weapon mastery XP?
No plans to expand it right now in terms of expanding it beyond 200 levels. We're looking at a couple of things. One is we do expect people to start just investing in other weapon sets. That's something that for TL we really like. We like the idea that you can play multiple weapons, have multiple builds. It's something that we see that the longer you play TL, the more you will have kind of invested into different weapon sets and combinations that you can take with you into the future. So we're not planning to expand beyond 200 right now, but we are planning to bring some additional weapon mastery passives. And so just as you invest more of that weapon mastery in other weapons, your total weapon mastery level, which unlocks those passive abilities, we expect to add more of those.
Can we ever expect player one-to-one trading?
Yeah, good question. I know that there are moments where you feel like I got a piece of gear, I'd like to give it to my friend or whatever. Right now, we don't plan to bring that in. We like the fact that the economy is driven through the auction house. We think, and we really believe this, that can help a lot of players acquire Lucent and other things that stimulates the economy. So right now, the plan is not to bring that and to continue to have really the auction house as a place where goods are exchanged between players.
The artifact system. Currently, that's a big pain point.
Yeah.
And yes, it's been updated recently, but players still feel it needs a bit more work. Potentially changing it to be more similar to the rune system.
Yeah.
Is there any plans for that?
Yeah, it's funny because as a player myself, I wouldn't mind if that system just got nuked into orbit, I gotta say. So I hear where you're coming from. I know the pain point. It's interesting because when it was first developed, what we thought is the artifact system could be this sort of ever-growing or ever-grinding thing that you could do to slowly just improve it over time and be looking for those min-max combos for different situations. Do you want the undead bonus damage for raid, or do you want max health or something because you want to be tankier in PvP? And you can kind of make all those decisions for yourself. But the way it played out obviously didn't meet our expectations. It's just become too convoluted for players, and we understand that. So we tried to do the UI rework, and while we do think there's been some benefits to that, we know that really the community still doesn't feel that that's hit the mark. So we're actively working now on just revamping the artifact system as a whole. So we'll be probably in late October, early November, roughly around there. We'll be introducing a new tier of artifacts, like a new grade, basically. And we'll be changing the way the system works. Artifacts won't have such a wide array of stats anymore, so we'll be shrinking the amount of stats that they offer, focusing on the stats that primarily players are seeking and going after more commonly. And we'll also be reducing how often they drop. So rather than it feeling like I need 1,000 artifacts so that I can maybe get that perfect combination of stats, we'll significantly reduce the amount of artifacts that drop, enhance it so that it's only the good stats. And then really what you're looking for is like an upgraded version of the previous one. Not quite like the runes, but similar in that vein, that you're looking for a stronger version of the stat you already have. And so dropping them less often, but making those drops more meaningful, we're going to take that approach. So we're still working through exactly how that will play out. Of course, we'll share more details probably in October with the community about what that will look like and go forward from there.
All right, good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, damage boards, DPS meters.
Yes.
Endgame PvE players really want this to be able to min-max their builds a bit better. Mm-hmm. Any chance we'll be getting that?
Yeah, not just PvE players. PvP players, I think, probably also would like to see be able to brag a little bit about how much they're doing in in competitive areas, and myself too. Like I really like DPS meters because they can improve my performance. And let me first answer your question and then give you a little bit of context. Yes, we are working on bringing DPS meters to Throne and Liberty. Now the question is exactly in what capacity that will be. There's a lot of paths that you can go with that. Do you do personal only DPS meters? Do you allow it for your group? Do you allow it for your vanguard? Do you allow it for your guild? Lots of different reasons for and against those things. Of course, toxicity is something that we really consider strongly when we're talking about DPS meters. Can that lead to something where it enhances the toxicity for players, et cetera? But for competitive players, myself included, I really like to use it as a way to improve my performance. I want to know if I'm in a raid group with my friends, am I helping the group because I'm doing a lot of damage, or am I, below par and I need to ask somebody for advice, or hey, how can I improve my rotation, things like this. So we see merit to both sides. So we are bringing it exactly what it'll look like. We're still sorting through. We're hoping that we can bring it this year, before the end of the year. And so we'll share, of course, more details as that goes. But I'm kind of curious, like, what's your take on the ideal DPS meter setup?
I'm used to a game where you have combat logs, so you can take literally all the information you want. I don't know if Throne and Liberty will get that, but at least something like you'd have in war games, which displays the amount of damage you've done, healing, blocked, etc., would at least help for starters.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're considering at least being able to show your individual performance. And there's more questions to be had about should that expand beyond just yourself or not, like I mentioned with the toxicity and stuff. So we're definitely going to be bringing something to allow you to really hone in on your own performance and improve it, or min-max, like you said, in certain situations. So it will be coming, like I said, hopefully this year. Don't quote me on it, but hopefully we're able to get that in sometime this year. And then we'll keep you posted on the progress.
In terms of dummies, people right now are using them to try and min-max builds, but it's rather insufficient to completely reflect a real boss fight. Is there anything we can get, like a more advanced training room where we can customize dummies and things like that, targets?
It's a tough situation because even, let's put ourselves in a hypothetical situation of, okay, instead of a target dummy of a regular dummy, it's Calanthea. Mm-hmm. Well, even then, it's hard to simulate what is it really like in the raid. You're not dodging mechanics, you're not having to block, you're not running to save another teammate who's, been trapped or whatever, so, or who has been sucked in by the orb. So you're not doing any of those things in a target dummy. And that is something that we worry about, where when we have these kind of boss-specific dummies, if you will, it sounds like that's kind of a common question is, does that really actually simulate what's going to be happening? So right now, we're not planning to bring that. Part of that is because we'll be adding this DPS meter, whatever that shapes up to be. So we think that will give you the opportunity when you're actually in the fight to really judge how you're performing. And so hopefully that will lessen the need for some of the more enhanced target dummies. So we know there is some desire to have that. I would say it's not quite at the forefront of stuff that we're working on right now, but we wouldn't shut the door on that either.
Right. I think the main specific things is to have a dummy that's considered a boss That way boss runes all work on the dummy.
Right.
And for the hitbox to be more reflective.
Right, to be larger. Yeah. I know that pain point. I play staff, and when Meteor misses, I know that feeling. So, yeah.
That's the main reason why people, I think, want a bigger dummy.
Yeah. So we'll look into that. And, like I said, I know people are starting to, especially as TL evolves, they're getting more and more understanding of how exactly their build works. They want to min-max stuff. They're starting to try different builds. So we're aware of that, definitely acknowledging that. That's why we're working on bringing on the DPS meter now. We feel it's the right time to start bringing that type of thing in. So we're definitely aware of people wanting to really be able to hone their builds, and we'll keep responding to the community on that.
Next up, we'll talk about legendary gear. Syncing. Are we going to be able to do that? Because right now, we've just discovered we can't. We've got to level 12, and we can't use the sync system.
Yep, that's right. And I assume you mean heroic gear.
Yes.
But yeah, so there is currently no syncing for heroic gear. You're asking a lot of questions that I think are prominent in the community, and we've also gone back and forth with internally when we're discussing with hardcore players, average players. There's lots of different opinions about what's the right way to do this. And I think that's kind of a common theme you'll often see in MMOs is there's such a broad group of player base that it's difficult at times to make one decision that everybody is happy with. As it relates to synchronizing heroic gear, right now our plans are not to do that. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't ever add that in the future, but we do view heroic gear as a longer term progression system, including if you want to get additional heroic gear moving forward. So we understand that right now it feels a little bit like, hey, before heroic gear, I had 2 builds or 3 builds, and I wish I could have that already with heroic weapons or heroic armor, whichever one you're trying to synchronize. So we definitely understand that feeling. But also for us, we feel that heroic gear is still a little bit in its infancy. It's only been out now for, by the time I guess this airs, maybe a little bit less than 2 months. So they're still pretty young. There's not fully mature. We don't even have heroic accessories yet. So, we think that there is time for players to continue to get those pieces of gear and keep working towards growing them and evolving them over time. So plan isn't right now to add that, but we do plan to continue to ease the difficulty of progressing them over time. Right now, I think players feel like it's okay if they had to grow 2, but there's just a limitation on materials. So we do plan to kind of provide more materials, make it easier for you to upgrade stuff over time, especially because as new players come, they're going to need to catch up, et cetera. So we view it less about making the time to get there less rather than just removing the path entirely. And so that's why for now we're not going to synchronize, but rather we'll look to ways to kind of keep supplying more materials to ease that progression over time.
Okay. Still on the matter of the legendary weapons, these skill cores, people find when they're switching between PvE and PvP, they would like it to be a bit easier.
Yeah.
Not having to use an imprint scroll every time.
Yeah, understood.
Can we get presets?
This is an answer I have to give maybe. I think all the others I've tried to kind of just say yes or no. This one is still a maybe for us because we haven't fully decided internally on that. But we are evaluating should there be a path to at least swap between a couple of skill cores. Maybe it's not infinite presets, but at least have a couple. Maybe so, as you said, you can have one primarily for PvE and one primarily for PvP. So that is something that we are strongly considering doing. We haven't fully landed on that, but that is definitely something we're considering much more than, for example, the synchronization that we just talked about.
In terms of PvP, alliances, it's been a big concern. And players are asking particularly to get the amount reduced. So it makes it a bit more fair playing field in large-scale PvP. What is the take from the devs? What's going to happen?
Yeah, well, let me give a direct answer here, and then I want to give a little bit of context behind that. So first thing is that we will be shrinking the alliance size. So on September 3rd, we'll be shrinking alliance sizes from 4 total guilds to 2 total guilds. So your own guild and then 1 additional alliance partner that you can have. So they are going to be shrinking. So hopefully a lot of people are happy, excited about that, see how it plays out. It was really a lot of just kind of debate that we had about that. That in my recent Tico talks, we asked about what does the community think about it. And I think sometimes, players are in their own bubble of community, so it feels like the answer is very obvious. But there's actually a lot of different paths that we could have taken, just shrinking them, or should we apply it only to certain content? Do alliances only make sense for sieges or arc bosses or a combination? What about Nebula? Is that the same or is it different? Because that's a PvP zone, and there's so many different opinions about that based on really what personal experiences you've had on your own individual server and what you like. So I also mentioned in the Tico talks that it would be an iterative approach, and that's how we feel about this change. So this will be the first step. We're going to shrink the alliances, and then we're going to evaluate. Is it right or wrong? Should it have been 2? Maybe it should be 3. Should it still be all content? Should it not? We're going to keep just evaluating alliances over the next several months and see how it plays out. But for now, that first step is going to be reducing it from 4 to 2.
In terms of Castle Siege, is there any chance that you could change it so that attackers can see the defenders?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that I think we hear come up somewhat frequently in the community of it's a bit chaotic in the Castle Siege at times because you don't know if it's worth attacking somebody else who maybe is also trying to infiltrate the castle rather than are you actually attacking the defending alliance. And right now we don't really have plans to shift that. Part of what we think makes Castle Siege fun is a little bit of that chaos. You know, there is that feeling of it's a siege, it's sort of everybody for themselves. Really, there is the concept of attackers and defenders, but really it's just everybody trying to claim the throne, you know? And you're only on my team for however long until I claim the castle. Once I claim the castle, you're not really on my team anymore. And so we know that at times that can feel a little bit overwhelming, but we think there's something to be said about that chaos, about needing to work with your guild and your alliance. That's really your team. Every other attacker is not technically on your team, although I know it can feel that way maybe in the early stages. So the short answer is no, we're not planning to make changes on that right now, but you know, we're always open to feedback and changes, and we do have other changes coming up for Castle Siege. We're going to be changing the map layout and stuff like that. Of course, we're changing the alliance size that we made. So we're making changes to try to just revitalize the Castle Siege, give some new meta or strategies, but the coloring is not part of that right now.
So with the alliance change, it will mean there's only 2 guilds defending the castle now
That's
versus
right.
4.
Yeah, and we hope that that leads to more castle turnover. We want the defenders to, of course, have a chance to defend, but we want that to be harder than it is to capture it from the current defenders. Right. And I would say right now it's felt a little bit like the defense has too much advantage. So with the reduction in alliances, we think that will help. And then we're also making changes, as I said, to the map layout, which should make penetrating the castle also a little bit easier. And we hope that that leads to a bit more offensive play.
Are there any plans to bring back the large-scale feel of open world PvP? So before Talandre, before the portal system, we had a lot more active open world PvP with those field bosses. Is there any chance that can come back as a daily activity?
Yeah, it's tricky because, you know, when we had those bosses, there was also a lot of negativity that came with that, right? And so we're trying to strike this balance of offering enough of that type of content to satisfy our users without also tipping back to the other side of the spectrum where there was a lot of unhappy users that felt like areas of the world were kind of inaccessible or dominated by these, you know, large groups or alliances that other players couldn't get to. So there's this balance that's trying to be striked here. That's why we have arc bosses, for example, that allow that open world PvP. Of course, the Nebula bosses as well. And so we're still evaluating if we should go beyond arc bosses. We've started having those conversations. Like, is it necessary to go beyond just arc bosses and have others that are there? So I would say it's real enough that we've started having conversations about whether we need to go one step further, but it's not so real that we're ready to make that change yet at the same time. And so we understand kind of that desire to have that, but as I mentioned, we have to balance that spectrum, because if we go too far, then we're going to end up in the same place we were before with just kind of the opposite side, having a lot of negativity, et cetera. So we've tried to do certain things, like with the GVG bosses, we've transitioned those to a different time. So it doesn't feel like you have to choose between the easier loot in a peace mode boss versus doing the actual GVG boss in the portal. We also think with the upcoming tier 3 gear that those portals will be more active again, because guilds will be re-seeking new gear. Of course, right now we're kind of at the end of the tier, so a lot of those aren't as active, but we think they'll be reinvigorated with the fact that there's new gear to chase in there. Everyone in your guild is going to be needing it again. So I'm hoping that we'll see a lot more activity increase in those areas, and then we'll keep monitoring. You know, maybe it doesn't work out like we're hypothesizing or whatever, and then we keep making adjustments. So for right now, we'll probably stick with those 4 arc bosses a week, the Nebula bosses, and then of course, you know, the GVGs, which are instanced, but hopefully also satisfy a little bit of that PvP itch that players have.
In terms of parity between the Korean server and the global servers, what's up with the difference between like battle pass and store updates? Are we ever going to see parity get the exact same?
I don't want to speak really for the Korean service. That's not an area that I oversee. I know that there are differences between the Battle Pass and the store and like what time we put certain offerings. And, you know, parity is a tough word, I guess. It just depends on when we think it's most appropriate to put certain things on sale or not on sale. And maybe updates are happening at different times. So we feel certain cosmetics might come out better or worse at certain times like that. So I would expect that you'll continue to see some differences between, you know, our shop and their shop and other things. There are some areas that maybe we don't want to sell that they're okay selling or vice versa. And so there will probably continue to be some differences and just sort of the general shop and Battle Pass experience between the two. It's not quite like content, where with content we're you know, as I mentioned in my last Tico talks, trying to kind of maintain that parity as much as possible. We do feel some deviation in the shop is okay.
Yeah, getting the raid at the same time was really good.
Yeah, we really enjoyed that. I mean, I loved being able to play it, and, you know, of course, I knew a little bit about it beforehand, but it was nice just to, you know, not everybody had guides the day one, you know, and it's a nice experience to be able to go through that. So, you know, our view on parity is really that it's more appropriate for content that players are enjoying and you know, less important in the shop.
I would say last question for now as we're wrapping up. The bunny outfit.
Okay, the bunny outfit, yeah.
Where's that, and why didn't we get it for Easter?
Also something that I think you ask 50 TL players, half will say they want it, half will say they don't want it, you know? Yes. And one of the things with TL, it's this medieval game. It has a very specific style to it. We're always trying to balance that kind of spectrum of what cosmetics are we bringing that clearly fit into the TL narrative, and then how much can we push the line on maybe going a little bit outside of the narrative, like modern clothes and things like this that we've, of course, already introduced. And there are certain times where we think maybe it's okay to break immersion a little bit more, like the swimsuit outfits that recently came out. Of course, those are a bit more immersion breaking, but it's a fun time in the summer. I think a lot of players do really look forward to that. And so right now we feel the bunny outfit it falls too far beyond the spectrum that we're comfortable introducing within this region. We think that it's too immersion breaking right now. It's a little bit too far-fetched. So never say never, but it's not in our kind of near-term plans, definitely not within the next year or anything like that. So I would say for now, don't hold your breath on that one.
So that was the interview. Keep in mind, not all questions could be answered then and there. Multiple I asked on the Creator Roundtable and others off camera. As a follow-up to this and the Creator Roundtable video itself, I will be summarizing a lot of those questions, putting them together in short format, and you can read everything, along with some things from Grob's and Welps's interview videos. I encourage you to go watch them. I should leave them in the video description below, as they will have a lot of their own questions. Potentially some asked the same as I did, but maybe Tico phrased it differently or even added some extra info. Overall, it was a great experience to meet Tico in person, along with some of the staff. But yes, in terms of Throne and Liberty, there's a ton to look forward to. Personally, I'm most excited about the new weapon, getting into the nitty-gritty details of what actually the skills do, and then, yes, the entirety of Tier 3 and what that really means for us. I will most definitely be releasing some tips and tricks with regards to prep and advice with all this new content upcoming. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.